Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia and today we have an exciting video. We are going to be reading and reviewing Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the final book in her Between Earth and Sky trilogy. At least I'm pretty sure it's staying as a trilogy. Yes, it says on the inside, stunning conclusion of the Between Earth and Sky trilogy. This is a trilogy set in a world that's inspired by Native American cultures, which makes it stand out from a lot of the other European-inspired fantasy books, and it's also by a woman of color. I read Black Sun and Fevered Star last year, and I really enjoyed both of them. I think probably now I would rate them lower than I did at the time, just because they haven't really stuck with me, but I did still really enjoy them and the world building, and I'm super excited to see how the trilogy finishes off. So we're going to do a little bit of a reading vlog portion as usual, and then I will come back and give you a in-depth review of this book. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright, welcome to a reading update of Mirrored Heavens. Please ignore my wet hair, I just had a shower. But I'm about at page 150 of Mirrored Heavens, and I'll be honest, at the moment sorry, I just saw a dark looking cloud. I don't have any really super strong feelings on this. I kind of at the beginning was like, it's been about a year I think since I read Black Sun and Fevered Star, and so I kind of had forgotten a lot of like the characters and what happened, but at this point I'm pretty well caught up now. I think I remember who everybody is, and I probably should have read like a quick synopsis or something before I jumped to this one, because I feel like it's not the book's fault that I forgot, and it was able to relatively quickly catch me up, so that is good. But honestly, I feel like it's kind of moving a bit slowly considering all the ground we have to cover. As I said, I'm at page 150 and there's like 500-ish pages in this book. Like 575, something like that. So it feels like a lot to do. I'm sure she can wrap it up because I'm sure the pace will start to pick up now as sort of things start to happen and events trigger other events and all that kind of stuff that, usually happens. But in terms of the pacing, I think the main problem that I'm having is that each chapter is one character's perspective, which is fine. But then we jump to the next character, and often there is a time skip between the chapters. So it really feels like she's presenting these little like chunks of the story, and it doesn't feel super like cohesive, like it's not flowing exactly correctly as I would like it to. So that is something that I'm having a problem with, and I think that makes it a little more difficult to also like connect with the narrative and the story when it feels like it's being told kind of piecemeal in terms of like the character jumps and the time jumps. I would like it, I usually like it better when you get multiple chapters or long chapters from a character before you jump to another character or location, but we didn't really. Like, they're quite short chapters, so that, and as I said, combined with the time skips, is making it feel kind of piecemeal, which is really breaking up the flow of the story for me. But yeah, that's kind of the main thing I have to say at this point. Hopefully, as characters maybe will start to come together, that will sort of be addressed or like become less of a problem, but I will have to give you another update later to see how that has progressed. another reading update for you. I'm at page 340, so I have like 250-ish pages to go. And at this point, I am much more drawn in, much more intrigued, having a good time. The character I'm most interested in, I think, is Ciala. I'm not entirely sure how you're meant to pronounce her name, but I really feel like she's very much coming into her powers in this book and becoming strong, and that's the one on this cover. There's still a lot for her to conclude in 250 pages, but the pace has been picking up, and I think things are going to start happening very quickly now as we wrap up this series. I don't have a ton to say at this point other than I'm getting much more invested now and getting pulled along by the story, and you know, finally getting to that sort of stage where like you're reading and you're like, I don't want to put it down because I need to know what like the next scene that's gonna happen is. But yeah, I'm just gonna take a quick pause from reading to film some stuff. I'm gonna do a book haul. I've never done one on my channel before, but I have acquired probably more books than is sensible lately, so I thought I would share it with you. So I'm gonna do that now, and then I will probably get back to this. I'm either gonna finish it today or tomorrow, we shall see. But as I said, I'm much more drawn in now, so I'm excited to see how it all wraps up. Alright, so I just finished Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse, and I'm gonna save my full review for like tomorrow or something when I've had a chance to compile my thoughts and give you a more like structured sort of review. But I will just say that I did quite enjoy it. I think the ending was well done. I liked the way things ended up happening and how the characters' arcs were concluded. Some elements of it are left like a little bit open, so I'm not sure if she's planning to come back and resolve those bits, or if she's just leaving it open so that it could be up to the reader's imagination. I kind of hope she just leaves it open and doesn't finish it, because sometimes these things are, sometimes it's nice to have those loose ends that they don't have to be fulfilled by the author for you to fulfill them in your mind, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that is Mirrored Heavens. I'm gonna think about my review and think about what my rating is going to be, and I will meet up with you when I've figured that all out to give you the final review and rating. Alright, welcome back to the wrap up for Mirrored Heavens / review section. So it's been a few days now since I finished this, so I've had lots of time to sort of think about it and collect my thoughts for you. I did do some tabbing when I read this, as you can kind of see, mostly just to help me remind myself sort of my thoughts of it when I go to do this section for you guys. So that's what most of these are. There's not a ton of them. Some of them are good writing or interesting character moments, or just like world building / general things that I wanted to remember. So that's kind of the tab system for that. And there was a lot that I liked about this book, but I wouldn't say there was a lot that I really loved. And as I said, it's been a couple of days since I finished the book, and I haven't really found myself thinking about it, except for when I'm like, oh, I gotta think of what I want to say for my review of Mirrored Heavens. And so for those reasons, I think I would say that the rating for this is probably like a 3.5. It feels pretty fair. I'm trying to be more strict, I guess, on my rating system, because I feel like I've had, at least last year, I gave it a lot of 5 stars to things that probably I wouldn't necessarily say actually are 5 stars. So this year I'm trying to be stricter, make it harder to get a 5 stars so that it actually means something, you know? So if we get into the review now, in terms of plot and pacing, I'd say for the most part it's pretty good. Not too many complaints there. However, I did think, as I said in my read section, that it starts off a little bit slowly, and that tends to happen, you know, the first part of a book is usually sort of slower than like the climax and stuff that comes towards the end. So it's not like a bad thing specifically, but when it is a final book in a series, you do kind of expect to get more straight into it from the beginning, because it's like you've already done 2 books worth of build up, so you're just ready to get into it. And so I think maybe a little bit could have been trimmed from the first 150 pages or so, just so that we got more into it, more on the ground right away, because we've already done the build up of the first 2 books. Let's just get into some action. And I did find myself a little bit bored in the beginning section, just because, as I said, it was a little bit slow, maybe a little bit drawn out in that first section. I think the plot in general was interesting. We've got like the gods trying to take over the pantheon / world. I don't know exactly whatever the hell Serapio was doing, and then also the sorcerer guy who was trying to take over Tova, I guess for his own desire for power. And I do like that there was kind of multiple things going on. It keeps it interesting, gives you sort of more to, I don't know, I just think it's interesting when there's more than one thing going on, you know? But I did at times feel like there was a lot going on, but not specifically enough depth for it all, because it is quite a short book. Well, I say short as if it's not 575 pages. Like, it's not a short book, but the series as a whole, for a fantasy series, is quite low on the page count. So she is limited in terms of the depth that she can give to all of these different things she's trying to weave into the story. And I think she did do quite a good job of telling a lot of story within a short number of pages, but I am sort of one of those people who's quite used to the longer fantasy epic style where there's really in-depth world building and storytelling and character development and all those things. So for me, coming from that perspective, I did feel like some of the things in this book and series in general were a little shallower than I typically prefer. However, I do think that makes it a good series for people who are new to getting into fantasy, or maybe people who are trying to graduate from YA fantasy to adult fantasy, that kind of sort of thing. But I do want to clarify that I don't think this is really intended for YA audiences. Yes, it's kind of shorter, maybe not as complex, but it does have only one spicy scene, which I don't know if there's like a limit for how many that it's allowed to include before it becomes adult, or if there's just like any is adult. I don't really know. But it's more to do with some of the things that are discussed within it, you know, some of the darker themes, and some of the violent scenes are relatively graphic. So I think that this is still an adult book. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this world is inspired by Native American cultures as opposed to the typical fantasy European sort of style, which I did appreciate. It gives it a different color, different flavor than your typical fantasy, although I do think that in sort of recent years we've really moved away from the medieval European fantasy setting a lot. Like, I don't think I've seen that many new releases that actually use that anymore, because we've got so many more interesting things going on. However, I do think she could have gone maybe a little bit deeper with it. Like, on the surface, it's clearly inspired by Native American cultures, but in terms of like, she's got the Skymaid clans, and they're clearly supposed to be like different nations / clans that are in sort of a Native American style. But from the little that I know about the structure of those groups, which is not a lot, I will say that. So if you know a lot about that, feel free to correct me in the comments, but she doesn't really use their nation or clan structure. It's very like, the surface is painted with like the inspiration brush from those cultures, but then the structure is very sort of typical descent-based structure, you know what I mean? Like, the child inherits from the parent, although in this case it is matrilineal, so it's like slightly different. So I think it would have been interesting if she'd gone a little deeper with the inspiration there. Although when I looked up Rebecca Roanhorse, because I wanted to see what nation she was, I discovered that although she is of Oke-Owenje descent, she was adopted by white parents, and she was raised without her original Native American culture, and she has not, since the article I read, connected with that group and like established a connection to her original culture. So I guess she is kind of an outsider looking in and doesn't specifically know what it's like to be in those structures either. So that's just something that I saw. But let's talk a little bit about the characters in this book. So a lot of them I find quite interesting, although Narampa, I think that's how you say it, me and fantasy names every time. I never know. But she had much more of a lead role in the first two books, and in this book she feels very much like she got relegated to a side character. Like, she does have her own perspective, and we get several chapters from her perspective, but it's definitely far less than some of the other characters, and she's kind of just chilling, doing her thing, trying to like learn how to use her powers, and it really doesn't feel like she's interacting with the main plot very much. She doesn't really actually impact the other characters until like the very end. So that was a little bit disappointing to see her kind of like shoved off to this side. But the new star of the show is Ciala, and then after her probably Serapio gets the most page time, and then Balam, I don't know. And I do quite like Ciala. I still think that the trauma that she talks about in Fevered Star is not really done that well. Like, she just out of the blue decides to confess it, and we don't really see much of like the struggle, I guess, to reach that point. We have some of it, but it does feel to me very just like she hasn't even known this guy she's confessing to that long, and she's just like, you know what, I just need to do this so that I can like use my magic or whatever. And then after that, it doesn't even really seem to affect her that much and like have an impact on her personality, which trauma tends to do. And she does kind of just blindly love Serapio, I don't know, guys. Which of course isn't like specifically unrealistic. People do dumb shit because they're in love all the time. But he's done some like pretty terrible things, and while some of them are like, oh, like you could say his god forced him or whatever, he still physically did them. And even though Ciala thinks that he needs redemption, she doesn't really, it doesn't really impact her opinion of him or her love for him. And like, even if she still loved him, which like is fine, it's sort of hard to force your emotions to do what you want them to necessarily, you would still think that it would cast some sort of shadow on that love, or like some sort of, like you would be repulsed in some level, I would expect, but we don't really get an exploration of that kind of thing. But instead she's like, oh, I've done like terrible things too, and she does definitely kill people in this book, but for the first time she's like protecting them from slavery, which I feel like we can all kind of get behind. And then the other like big one anyway, is more of like a revenge thing, which could be more iffy, but when you're in her head as she's doing it, you're like, yes, I feel like you deserve this. This feels like the right course for you, and it's like maybe even the course you would choose for yourself. I don't know. But Serapio is more confusing for me. I forget quite a bit of what he actually did in Fevered Star, but he obviously originally came to Tova because his god wanted to like, I don't even know, conquer, like be in control of that city specifically. I think I'm forgetting some maybe key elements there. Just wants to take over the world or whatever. But now his god has like kind of abandoned him, we're supposed to understand, and yet he still wants to be king in Tova, and seems to see himself as like the defender of the city, even though he literally just conquered it and killed a whole bunch of people doing it. Like, you're not doing a very good job defending the city or being like its savior. So I'm just don't really know what the heck he's trying to do in this book. He's presented as one of the characters we should be rooting for. And I'm fine with morally gray characters, but I need to understand their motivations. Like, what are their reasons? How did they come to the conclusion that these are things they need to do? Like, all these things can be explained and can be entertaining in a book, and you can make you feel some type of way about a character, even if you don't specifically like them, but there needs to be a motivation, and I just felt like I was missing it in this book, and maybe it's in Fevered Star, but I just feel like it should be kind of something that he thinks about more often. And then finally, I just want to talk about the conclusion. So in some aspects, I did like it. As I got to the end of the book, I got a lot more sucked in and wanted to keep reading, see what happened. But in some aspects, I felt like it fell a bit short. So it was like a small boss battle type of situation. I won't say between who because spoilers. But honestly, there wasn't really a lot of action. And one of the big things that happens at the end isn't even really one of our characters at all. So, and once the boss battle thing was over, these big things, like the big armies or whatever, that was supposed to be insurmountable odds, just kind of got resolved really easily and quickly and like kind of like a few sentences off page. So that was maybe a little bit disappointing, because there's not really, like there's some fight scenes in here, but they're mostly just between like one or two characters. So considering it's like the final and they're building up to like, oh, there's gonna be like a battle, you don't even get
any like action. So if you don't like action, this is probably a good series for you, but I did kind of feel like the conclusion was a little bit anticlimactic maybe because of that, because it was over like so quickly and without a lot of struggle, I guess, really. It really felt like the plot and all of the different threads at the end were just kind of there to facilitate Serapio and Nixiala's love story, which was a little bit of a letdown, honestly, because that's kind of not really what this is presented as, what it builds up to be. But as I said, there was a lot that I liked about this book, but just not much that I found that I loved. So overall, maybe like a tiny bit of a letdown, but I did still enjoy it. I won't say that it was a bad book. It still got me sucked in the second half, and if you've been reading the series, I do think you should continue on and read this conclusion. It was decent. Sorry, that's very not a very exciting way to round out the video. It was decent, but unfortunately, that's kind of just what it was. It was a good book, not a great book. I seem to be kind of reading a lot of books that fall into that category recently, and I really need to read some stuff that's really good because I'm tired of reading kind of mediocre books. I have a huge pile of books over here that I think will be good, hopefully not mediocre, so I'm excited to get to those, but unfortunately, Mirrored Heavens is not breaking the streak of like 3.5-star books. But that is all that I really have to say about Mirrored Heavens and what is this trilogy even called? Between Earth and Sky. So if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.